We're here at Daf Tzadi Zayin, and I believe we got up to Rava Omar. So let's just see if we can find the place here. One second. Rava Omar. Let's see, how do we? We're in the bottom section. That's after the beginning of the new chapter, which is called Nosim Ala Nus, the 11th chapter, which we began on Thursday. And you'll see the Mishnah, which is 3 lines, and then the Gemara. If you drop down approximately 8-9 lines, or maybe an easier way we're doing it, there are the thinner lines and the wider ones. So if you're counting up from the thinner lines, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You'll see the first word in the line is Omar, Rava Omar. Omar is the first word in the line. Now, Rava is going to offer an alternative answer to the Gemara's question, which was Minohani Milu. So once again, if you're counting down from the Mishnah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines down, the first word in the line is Bidarabanan, and you scoot your finger across, you'll see Minohani Milu. And you recall that we were working on the distinction between 2 categories or 2 basic, fundamentally different scenarios. One is the relative of an out-of-wedlock intimacy relationship, like anusa mafuta, and the other was a woman who's related to my relative who had a marriage relationship with her. So let's say if we take the case of Aviv, a man is enjoined for marrying Eishes Aviv. But if it was Anusas Aviv or Mafutas Aviv, then there's no Iser in marrying. And until Rava, we had based this halacha on the pasuk in Vayikra Chaf, where the Torah uses 2 languages and shifts from one to the other. Sometimes it uses the word shchiva and sometimes the word kicha. So, for example, when the Torah talks about a man having a relationship with his daughter-in-law, it says yishkav es kaloso. But in the case of a mother and a daughter, isha ubita, there the Torah used the term likicha. When it says isha asher yikach es isha ves ima. And lomer lecha, and this is going to teach us that derech lekuchin asra Torah. Is that mine or yours? Okay. Only reason I ask is not to put you on the spot, just that I want to know if I have to shut off something, world of technology. Now, on this Yalfusa, from the word kicha, in the parsha of Isha Sharikach es Isha ves Ima, the Gemara had a shaklu v'tarya back and forth between Rav Papa and Abaye back to Rav Papa. Rav Papa objected to this derivation because since it says kicha in the case of achoso, and it would seem that their kicha, which means kiddushin udi asar, aval derech shchiva shari. The Torah only says that you can't marry your sister. What does it mean you can't marry your sister? But you're allowed to have relations with your sister? That's impossible. And Abai had to defend this Yalfusa from the onslaught of Rav Papa by saying that this royal kicha, royal shchiva, shchiva. Well, let's just review that last point so that we can start Rav. What's called royal kicha and what's called royal shchiva? So royal kicha is nasa isha ve'ima. He married a woman and her daughter. And there was no blood relationship, no genetic relationship between the Makadesh and the Miskadeshes, meaning he married the mother. He's not in any way related to the mother. There's no heir of a relationship to the mother. And when the Torah says now that her daughter becomes an erva, that is a case of royal akich. The only reason why the daughter could be an erva is because of the original kiddushin when he married the mother. But in the case of achoso, that's a whole different story. Achoso is a genetic relationship, is what's called share basa. That's called royal shchiva. Let's just read, I'll just read to you this comment he writes. Haroy lekicha, she talking sheyavarsa isa b'makom shoyelo bo lekicha kigon shenasa ima isha ve'ima b'nasa isha v'achosa sheshayach behen v'isha rishona kiddushin. Why is this woman who's the wife, the sister of his wife, why is she asura? It can only be because he married Rachel, therefore through that marriage he became asur to Leah. Or in the case of a mother and a daughter, he married the mother, therefore he's asur to the daughter. Is therefore yesh lefarish mashma'uso sheyel dafka al yidei kich. So the Torah is very deliberate about using the word kicha because the Torah would not prohibit this erva unless it came through kicha. But royal shtiva kachoso sheyadu lakol she'ein tosim b'kedushin ein litos v'litlos v'likuch. So again, even though the Torah says isha sheyikach es achoso, but it's clear to everyone that it doesn't mean nikach, literally, because it's impossible to create a kicha with his own sister. Therefore, yesh lefarish mashma'usa hisha asra Torah b'derech shchiva lo al yedei kiddush. Rav Amar, this is where we got up to. Onas isha mutulisas bita. Mehacha, we're going to derive it from the following pasuk in the Parsha of Arayos. Siv, ervas bas bincha o bas bitcha lo segale. Ha bas bina dida. So we're talking, if you take the pasuk literally, we're talking about a biological grandchild. 1 second. Bas bincha or bas bitcha. So Rav is saying that on the surface level, there seems to be a contradiction here between two psukim. And the case that we're dealing with is Bas Bino and Bas Bito. One pasuk says, Eres Bas Bincha O Bas Bitcha Lo Segala, including in this Iser Erva, Bas Bino and Bas Bito. Bas Bino Dida, what about your wife's granddaughter? Or Bas Bito? Gully. That's not included here. And now he asks the stira, Uksiv, but there's another pasuk. Ervas Isha Ubita Lo Segala Es Bas Binov Es Bas Bita Lo Tika. So again, it's her granddaughter, but not his granddaughter. The first pasuk seems to say Bas Bincha or Bas Bitcha. That's his biological granddaughter, either through his son or through his daughter. As far as her grandchildren are concerned, granddaughters, I should say, which is either Bas Binah or Bas Bita, that means that she was married to another man. So it's not his granddaughter, it's his wife's granddaughter. So for her, let's say it's a second marriage. I don't know about him, but the first pasuk seems to indicate that there's no Iser Erva. But now it says in the second pasuk, Es Bas Binav, Es Bas Bita Lo Sika. First pasuk indicates that it's got to be his grandchild, his granddaughter. The second pasuk says it could be her granddaughter, meaning from another marriage. Okay, side. So Rav asks, how do we reconcile this apparent contradiction? Can be onsin the can be nesuir. So when it says that he's not chayev, it doesn't actually say so, but it implies that he's not chayev for her granddaughter. That's a case of onsin. But the second pasuk that we quoted, that he is chayev for her grandchildren, that's a case of nesur. So if a man rapes a woman, then there's no Iser Erva vis-a-vis her daughters or granddaughters from another man. But if he marries a woman, then her granddaughters, no matter from which side, right, through a son or a daughter, are prohibited under the Isser Erev. So when we read the first pasuk that says your granddaughter, meaning your son's daughter or your daughter's daughter, is prohibited, implying that you don't have a problem with someone else's granddaughters. That's where you had a rape relationship to a woman, and therefore you're not enjoined from having a marriage relationship with her children, her grandchildren. But where the Torah says explicitly, Ervas Isho Bita, and it says as Bas Bina, as Bas Bita, Lo Sikach, that's a case where you married a woman. And once you marry a woman, then there's an Isser Erva to her children and grandchildren, meaning her daughter or her granddaughter. And that's the way Rava is going to reconcile this contradiction. And now the Gemara asks the following question on Rava. Epochana, why don't I reinterpret the pasuk in the opposite way? Namely, that if the Torah is saying in one scenario he's allowed to marry her granddaughter, and in others he's not, maybe we're going to say he cannot marry her granddaughter when he raped her. Since he did such a terrible action and he's guilty of a crime, maybe we should be more harsh with him and penalize him. And we're not going to allow him to marry her grandchildren, her granddaughter. But if he married a woman, maybe he could marry her granddaughter because he didn't violate any Isser. So the Gemara answers, Arayos she'er ksiv bahu. The Prophet says, Ervas isho bitalo sigale, es bas benov es bas bitalo sikach legalos ervasa shara heim. So we're emphasizing the word shara, and obviously it's in the possessive form, but the root of the word is she'er. Says the Gemara, "B'nesuin ika she'er, be'onsim leka she'er." Right, the Torah says that when you marry a woman, she becomes your she'er. A rape situation does not create a she'er relationship. So therefore, when the Torah says lo sikach in bas bina bas vita, and the Torah adds the word she'era, the Torah means to say that these relatives are like your relatives because their mother or grandmother is your she'er. Through marriage, your wife becomes your she'er, and therefore her granddaughters are like your granddaughters. But in the case of onsim, a man rapes a woman, he has no relationship with that woman. There's no she'er that's created. So if the Torah in one pasuk implies that he's allowed to marry her granddaughters, then by contrasting it with that other pasuk that says bas bito bas bito lo segala, there the lo sikach, there it says she'era. It must be that the reason why these granddaughters are prohibited is because of the she'er relationship that you have with the grandmother. You can't marry a woman and then have a relationship with her children because the Torah says lo sikach legalos ervasa she'era heim. So that's the drasha. Now we go on. The Mishnah says, Rabbi Yehuda oser be'anusas aviv. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees, and he says that a woman that had a relationship with your father, either through in a marriage situation or out of wedlock, either through rape or seduction, in all those cases, Rabbi Yehuda says you're not allowed to marry. My time with Rabbi Yehuda. Why is your father's woman, in quotation marks, why is that different than all the other cases of an erva, where you're only asur be'erva to a woman because of a marriage relationship? Here you're asur even in the case of an out of wedlock situation. Where is the source for this? And the Gemara answers that Siv lo yikach ishas eshes aviv v'lo yigale knaf aviv. Why wasn't the Torah satisfied? And why wouldn't it have been sufficient for the Torah simply to say lo yikach ishas eshes aviv? And the Torah adds lo yigale knaf aviv. Knaf is the garment, so to speak, that you lift up in order to have an intimate relationship. So knaf aviv means bia. Knaf aviv means a woman who had a bia relationship with your father. Now, the beginning of the pasuk says lo yikach ishas eshes aviv. That indicates a woman who had a marriage relationship with your father. But knaf aviv expands it to include a woman who did not have a marriage relationship with your father, but rather was anusaso or mefutaso lo yigal. Torah says you're not allowed to marry such a woman. Now, obviously, we're going to have to see two things, answer two questions. Number one, how does the phrase knaf aviv indicate anusas aviv? And number two, what will the Chachamim, the Tanakhama of that Mishnah, do with that pasuk of knaf aviv? So let's go one by one. First, the Torah says lo yikach ishas eshes aviv. It doesn't say anusas aviv in the pasuk. Are you able to hear me?
No.
The internet went down. It's a horrible situation. I'm facing this. It happened in my Daf Yomi shir this morning. They've tried everything. I don't know. So the Gemara asks, Umimai dibanusaksiv. From whence does Rabbi Yehuda derive the conclusion that this pasuk is talking about an anusa? I mean, it says Eishes Aviv. So the Gemara says the Chsiv Meiluye Dekra. In the very next pasuk, it says, "V'nasana isha shochevi mol avia narach hamishim kasef." That's a case of anusa, and we have a principle called smichus. And Rabbi Yehuda waves the flag. He ascribes to the method of smichus. And when you have two psukim near each other, one pasuk reveals the pshat to the other pasuk. So we're going to learn that lo yigale knaf aviv refers to anusas aviv from the fact that immediately, right before those two psukim next to each other, it says hashochev ima, and that's clearly a reference to anusa. Rabbanon. What do the Rabbanon do with this smichus from which Rabbi Yehuda derives that we're talking about an anusa? Iavi samechle kideka amrit. Hashda delo samechle. In other words, there's two psukim, but there's something wedged in between that breaks up the smichus. The pasuk lo yikach ishas eshes aviv comes between v'nasan ha'isha shokrev ima and v'lo yigala knaf aviv. And therefore, there's a technical problem with smuchin here. So for this, I'm just going to, if you hold on a second, I just want to get the Chumash so we see it inside. It's right there on the table. So we're in Dvarim Perek Chav Gimel, Pasuk Aleph. Lo yikach ish es eshes aviv, v'lo yigale knaf aviv. And now we fast forward to Pasuk Chav Tes, v'nasana isha shochev imal avi anara chavishim kesef lo yid blah blah blah. So there are an entire unit of psukim that separate between the Lo Yigala Knaf Aviv and the parsha of Anusa. Chav Gimel. It's always good to see this inside. You have a chumash. If you can get your hands on a chumash Dvarim. We're looking at Perek Chav Gimel in Parshas Kiteitzah. Find it. Not used to this art. Shtayim?
Yeah.
What do you mean by I don't
know that the difference between the break between Kushtayim.
Kuf Beis. Oh, you mean Chav Beis? Chav Beis and Chav Gimel. So at the beginning of Perek Chav Gimel, Parshas Kiteitzah, it says Lo Yikach Ishes Eshes Aviv, Lo Yigaleh Knaf Aviv. Now let's rewind to the end of Perek Chav Beis. V'nasano Isha Shochev Imal Avi Anara, etc., etc. Or Yuchal Shalcha Kol Yom. That's how Perek Chav Beis ends. So that's called, according to Chachamim, Lo Samech. I see what he's saying. The first pasuk in Perek Chav Gimel opens with the word Lo Yikach Iches Aviv, which clearly indicates that this woman was married to my father. So that the previous pasuk, which is talking about Anusa, we need that to attach it to V'lo Yigala Knaf Aviv at the end of pasuk Aleph, Perek Chav Gimel. But the beginning of pasuk Chav Aleph wedges in the middle between these two, between Anusa and Lo Yigala Knaf Aviv, Lo Yikach Ish. Es Eshes Aviv mafsik bein b'nosan isha shochev ima levein Lo Yigala Knaf Aviv, and therefore it's not considered smucha. It's really a little strange because in truth, Lo Yigala Knaf Aviv is addressing the same. Again, we're going to have to see what is the other option for Lo Yigala Knaf Aviv. It says, Mi boile lich Ravanan, the Yom Ravanan Meshmuel. What are we going to derive from Lo Yigala Knaf Aviv? V'chomeres Yovam Shal Aviv HaKosum Medah. So what happens is, let's say my father has a brother who dies without children. So his wife falls to my father for Yibum. And she's a Shomeres Yavam. She's waiting for my father to implement Yibum. And the relationship now between this woman and my father is that of a Zikas Yibum. She's not married to my father. He hasn't implemented Yibum, but there's a Zika. And what is the Torah telling me? Lo Yidal Knaf Aviv. I'm not allowed to have a relationship with this woman who is a Zkuka. Now again, there's something very strange going on. I can't marry this woman because she was my uncle's wife. But let's put that on the back burners. The Torah is telling me, according to this Rosh Rabbanan, that the reason I can't marry this woman is because she's a Shomeres Yavam to my father. Because when my uncle dies, she falls for even to my father. Is my knaf aviv, knaf haroyali aviv, lo yigal. So the Gemara immediately objects to take Lemishum Dodaso. She's his auntie, she was married to his uncle, his father's brother. And the Gemara answers, Lavar ola b'shnei lav. So in addition to the lav of Dodaso, we slap him with another lav, and that is Lo Yigala Knaf Aviv, because she's also not only the wife of his uncle, but she's now Skuka Liyibum to his father. So we have one lav in the Torah which is called Ervas Achi Avicha Lo Segala, which says Lo Sikrav Dodascha Hi. So even if his uncle died, the Torah says that Isser of Dodasa still remains. And in addition to that, we have Lo Yigal Knaf Aviv, because of the Yibum, the Zika situation. So in a certain sense, this woman is married both to my father's brother and to my father. She was married to my father's brother because he married her. And that gives her the status of Dodas, where the Torah says, Lo Sikrav Dodasohi, Ervas Achio Vicha. On the other hand, she's also married, so to speak, to my father, because Zika is like marriage. Therefore, we add lav or b'shnei lav. If he were to have a relationship with the Zika, the Zkuka, whose father, he violates not only the lav of Lo Yigala Knaf Aviv, but also the lav of Ervas Achi Avicha. So the Gemara asks, "V'teipaklei mishum Yevamot lashuk." You think you got away with two lav? What about the lav of Yevamot lashuk? Any Zkuka is asur lashuk to anyone. And the Gemara answers, "Lav rola b'shlosha lav." So now we have three lav. You have three for the price of one. Ivais ema li'achar bisa. So here we have a diagram. Here's the case. Tough kuf chaf tesa, but this will conclude for today. Where is tough kuf chaf tesa? Second here. Oh, here it is. Ruven v'Shimon achim. Ruven ben Avram. Nasa Shimon es Sarah. Umeis Shimon below Banim, but Nafla Sarah, that's Esha Shimon, Lifnei Ruven Liyibon. Achakas Meis Ruven, Vishuv Ein Sarah Zkuka Liyibon. Mikevan Sha'achshav Sarah Asura Liavram, Kach Be'isa Dodaso, Avalo Be'isa Yevamot lashuk Shari Achshav Eina Zkuka Liyibon, Ba HaPosuk Li'osra Olav, Gam Be'isa Lo Igala. Mishum shahoisa ru'uya lisyabim li oviv. Kishahoya chad. So the Gemara is coming up with a scenario where there would be no Iser of Dodaso, but there would be an Iser because of this Yibum that's derived from the possible Yigal Knaf Aviv, because she fell for Yibum to his father. Why is there no Iser of Achos, of Eshes Achi Aviv? Because it's Liachar Bisa. I'm sorry, just the opposite. There's an Iser of Lo Yigal, there's an Iser of Ervas Achi Avicha, but there's no Iser of Lo Segala, because what happened was that his father died. And therefore, this woman who was married to his father's brother is no longer Knaf Aviv, because Knaf Aviv means Knaf Shayaroi Li Aviv Bechayav. As long as he's alive, she's called Knaf Aviv. So now she's no longer Zkuka Liyibu, and therefore there's no longer an Iser of Yevamot Shuk. And the Torah comes to add that there's an Iser of Dodaso in addition to, one second, Losif all of Iser of again, Ba'asa Torah, Lahosif Olav Iser, Milvad HaIser Sha'asar Ba Mishum Dodas. Again, why do I need the pasuk of Lo Sigala Knaf Aviv as a case of Yibum? If anyway I have the Iser Dodaso, the answer is Li'achar Misa, where his father died. There's no longer Zikas Yibum, no longer an Iser Yibam Shul. L'chayvo b'shnei lav gam liachar misas aviv mishum dodaso u'mishum knaf aviv. So mikevan she'achshav sara asura li'avram that be'isur dodas. Lo be'isur yibavel shul terei achshav enes kukali yibum ba possibly also of gam be'isur lo yigala mishum she'hoisa re'uya l'syavem li'aviv shoyachad. As you're telling me, why do I need this separate lav of what? Of lo yigala knaf aviv? If anyway she's yivamal shuk, but the answer is that he died. In other words, his father died, so she's no longer yivamal shuk. But nevertheless, the Torah says lo yigala knaf aviv, that in addition to the dodaso violation, he's also liable for a violation of Knaf Aviv. Why? Because she was Ru'uya Li Aviv. So he would violate two lavim, the lav of Dodaso and the lav of Knaf Aviv. Okay, then, so we're up to Daf Sadi Dayan Amud Beis. We'll pick up Mirza Hashem tomorrow. Okay, then? So let me wish you a great day. Thank you so much.